Welcome to the Explainer. You know, when we picture elite athletic training, we almost all jump to the exact same image, right? Sweat-soaked gyms, grueling track sessions, heavy weights, just hours and hours of relentless, exhausting physical drilling. But today, we're going to look at a completely different side of performance. We are exploring some of the most powerful, impactful training an athlete ever does. And the fascinating part? It happens in total silence, with their eyes closed and their body perfectly still. Okay, let's dive into this with what has to be one of the most incredible, almost unbelievable stories from the 2008 Olympics. Imagine you're standing on the blocks at the absolute pinnacle of global competition. You dive into the pool and almost immediately disaster strikes. Your goggles completely fill with water. You are essentially swimming, totally blind, on the world's biggest stage. Yet, this athlete didn't panic at all. He swam blind for 175 meters, won the gold medal, and somehow set a world record. That athlete, of course, was Michael Phelps. So I've got to ask you, how on earth do you break a world record completely blind? I mean, it wasn't just luck, and it wasn't just physical endurance either. The secret is that Phelps had this deeply ingrained neurological script running in his mind. He had already swum that exact race, including the parts where things went horribly wrong, hundreds of times in his imagination. When the disaster happened, his brain just simply executed the program. Which brings us to Section 1, the myth of daydreaming, and how visualization is actually a deeply systematic practice. And this brilliantly illustrates just how mainstream this has become. You see, back in the 1970s, the Soviet Union essentially pioneered sports psychology. They realized physical training had a biological ceiling, so they did something revolutionary. They embedded psychologists directly into their Olympic coaching staff and started treating mental rehearsal with the exact same rigor as physical conditioning. Fast forward to today, and researchers confirm that anywhere from 70 to 90% of modern Olympians regularly practice mental imagery. The secret is out. The world's top performers are using targeted visualization to literally program their bodies, dial down anxiety, and lock in muscle memory before they even set foot on the field. To really understand why so many elite athletes do this, take a look at this breakdown from a 2025 study. At the elite level, physical conditioning is basically a given. Everyone is strong, everyone is fast. But researchers found that psychological factors account for a striking 30% of the difference in performance. When those physical margins are just razor thin, the mind becomes the absolute ultimate frontier for gaining a competitive edge. All right, let's transition into Section 2, inside the athlete's brain, where we get into the hard neuroscience of it all. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames the brain as a literal performance engine, an organ where focused thoughts can genuinely build physical muscle. And to understand that, we have to talk about mirror neurons. Discovered back in the 90s, they totally flipped our understanding of human movement. Basically, these are cells that fire when you perform an action, sure, but they also fire when you just observe or imagine that exact same action. It's literally a physical bridge between thought and action, meaning when you mentally simulate shooting a free throw, you are physically programming your brain's motor cortex. Which leads us to a massive plot twist in the research: neural efficiency. Getting physically stronger without moving a single muscle sounds like science fiction, right? But a 2025 brain imaging study using near-infrared spectroscopy showed that expert brains actually work smarter. They use way less metabolic energy for routine tasks because their neural pathways are just so finely tuned. And thanks to brain plasticity, studies show that visualization alone can measurably increase isolated muscle strength. Your brain essentially boosts the communication pathways to your body, making you stronger from the inside out. To encode these skills, athletes rely on two distinct perspectives. First, there's internal imagery. That's the first person. You're looking right through your own eyes, feeling the exact grip of the tennis racket, sensing your shoulder rotate. Then you have external imagery, which is third person. You're basically watching yourself on a camera. Actually, scratch that. It's more like being your own director. It's incredibly useful for sports like gymnastics or diving, where your visual form is being judged. And elite athletes don't just pick one. They strategically use both to build a cohesive, powerful network across different regions of their brain. But here is the kicker. Effective visualization is almost never just visual. It relies on multi-sensory, high-definition imagery. You really have to engage the whole shebang. Three-time Olympic freestyle skier Emily Cook famously said about her own process, "You have to smell it. You have to feel the exact muscle tension, hear the roar of the crowd, smell the ice, and taste the sweat." By engaging all those sensory channels, you're completely tricking your brain into experiencing that imagined performance as absolute reality. So, how exactly do we put this into practice? Welcome to Section 3, the Petlep blueprint. So the crucial point is moving from abstract theory into a very strict, actionable protocol. Enter the Petlep model, introduced by researchers Holmes and Collins in 2001. This is the absolute evidence-based gold standard for designing a visualization program. The entire goal here is what they call functional equivalence, which just means it ensures your mental rehearsal matches the physical reality of the sport as closely as neurologically possible. Petlep is an acronym for 7 critical elements, and I'll run through them quickly. Physical, you should actually adopt your starting posture. Environment, try to visualize while in the actual stadium or pool. Task, focus on the exact details of the movement. Learning, update your imagery as your skills level up. Emotion, intentionally feel that competitive pressure. Perspective, use first or third person. But I really want to emphasize timing. Your mental imagery must unfold in real-time speed. If a sprint takes exactly 10 seconds on the track, it needs to take exactly 10 seconds in your mind. Your brain's temporal rules don't just magically change because your eyes are closed. Now, within that framework, you absolutely have to separate the process from the outcome. Outcome visualization is focusing on winning the gold medal or, crossing the finish line first. And hey, that's great for motivation, but it doesn't teach your body anything. Process visualization, on the other hand, is feeling every single breath, every step, and every tactical decision along the way. While outcome imagery keeps you pushing through a grueling season, process imagery is what actually encodes those specific motor skills directly into your nervous system. Moving right along to Section 4, Healing and Mental Armor, where we look at injury and anxiety. Let's move to and see how this builds incredible resilience, especially during sudden adversity, crushing anxiety, or the isolation of rehab. Which brings us right back to Michael Phelps. This relies on a technique called coping imagery, deliberately rehearsing the absolute worst-case scenario. Phelps didn't just visualize the perfect, flawless race. He vividly visualized his goggles breaking, his suit tearing, false starts, hundreds of times over. Because he mentally rehearsed those exact disasters and his responses to them, his nervous system had an automatic, totally panic-free template ready the very second his goggles filled up with water in Beijing. This mental armor is also absolutely vital for injuries. Just take a look at this staggering statistic. 56% of athletes who suffer an ACL tear and achieve a fully physically healed knee never return to their pre-injury performance levels. Think about that. The joint is physically fixed, but the mind is absolutely terrified of re-injury. To fix this, sports psychologists use a specialized technique called dynamic motor imagery to actively cure that psychological block. By safely visualizing the injured area working perfectly, athletes rebuild their confidence and essentially heal the psychological trauma of the injury itself. Finally, let's look at Section 5, the high-tech mental lab, where human minds meet machines. We are stepping into a seriously cutting-edge era right now, specifically looking at developments from 2024 to 2026. This is where technology is transforming visualization from a solo, subjective mental exercise into an incredibly objective, measurable mental performance lab. Virtual reality allows athletes to do perceptual cognitive training, like a quarterback reading a defense, without taking any actual physical hits. Biofeedback monitors heart rates in real time, teaching athletes how to actively regulate their physical stress during mental imagery. And EEG neurofeedback actually measures brain waves, allowing elite competitors to practice triggering those highly sought-after alpha wave flow states strictly on demand. And when you throw artificial intelligence into the mix, the results are literally striking. A 2024 study showed that when athletes used AI-aided visualization, meaning AI-generated highly personalized imagery scripts based on their unique physical data and past performances, those athletes improved their focus by 18%. And even crazier, they reduced their physical injury risk by nearly 25%. The technology just makes the mental script completely flawless. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of our explainer today. We've seen the neuroscience. We've seen how multi-sensory, high-definition visualization literally rewires your motor cortex. Your brain fundamentally struggles to tell the difference between a vividly imagined event and physical reality. So whether you are trying to win an Olympic medal, recovering from a major setback, or honestly just stepping up to a daily challenge in your own life, if your mind is truly this powerful, what are you going to imagine next?